Thanks, Rob. The team here at 333 Midland has been extraordinary. They jumped right in and said, we would like to host a celebration for Jim. So thank you to the whole crew at 333, offering the gallery space, the studio space, installing the show, working the Facebook event page. They just did an incredible gift for Jim and the family. In particular, I just want to give a shout out. Rob, Mike, Nancy, Vic, Doug, Pat Duff, Bob, Liz, Nancy Rodwin, Darren, John Hill, and of course, Jody Mitchell. Ann, did I get Ann? And Ann, of course. I knew I was going to miss someone. So, and everybody else that I just missed. Thank you so much. Thank you to the friends and family for bringing food and beverages to make this happen. So let me just start off with expressing my condolences to the family members who are here and Jim's beloved ones. I know that you've been going through a lot of pain, and hopefully I know you know, that Jim was so well loved, and so we're all sending peace and comfort during this time. My name is Annette Vanover, and I had the pleasure of working alongside Jim at Focus Hope as part of the community arts department that he founded. I first met Jim in 1998, so I've had 23 years of calling him colleague and more so of calling him friend. Well, most of you know about his contribution to the art scene in Detroit. A lot of you don't know about his career. He had really quite the professional career. It's pretty broad, and I'm going to try to do my best to whip through it, but how do I whip through 40 plus years of a really incredible professional life? So for those of you who know me, or if you don't know me, let's make this interactive. Shout something out if you hear something about Jim that you knew, or you want to add something about his career. I just really welcome that, so I'm not a talking head. He had a 40-year extensive experience in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors, and it was so diverse. His early years, he was integral part of regional transportation planning in the 70s and 80s, both at SEMCOG and at SEMTA, the predecessor to SMART, all the SMART buses that are going throughout the Tri-County in Detroit. In fact, last week I had a conversation with Jim's colleague and friend, Debbie Fisher, and she just happened to work with him at both SEMTA in the early years and then later at Focus Hope. And she said, and I quote, "Jim had an extraordinary early understanding of the pressing need for a regional transportation solution, as well as ideas for dedicated bus lanes and ride sharing, some of which," she said, "came to fruition." And then she added, "See, Jim was a phenomenal force for good even in that era as well." So in 1974, Jim landed a position as planner and researcher with SEMCOG. And this is where he really cut his teeth in what would be a long and successful career in the broad community development arena. In this position, he started doing regional transportation research, project planning, and proposal writing. 4 years afterwards, he left SEMCOG and he got the job at SMART, and he landed the position of Director of Administrative Services. And it's throughout his tenure at SMART, and in Jim's word, I found this on Facebook. I was scrolling through, stalking. Jim said this is where he rode the corporate lightning up the ladder. And ultimately, he became SMART's general manager, where he served as the executive chief executive and operating officer. Managing, now listen to this, I get full of anxiety when I read what he was responsible for. An annual operating budget of $52 million, assets of more than $50 million, 900 employees, and serving 12 million passengers per year, and oversaw the construction of the People Mover and was instrumental for the arts installations in the stations. I didn't know that. I think it's really impressive. And so, I was looking through all this transportation stuff and like, oh my gosh, maybe that's where he got his love of automobiles and transportation. But then I said, Have you seen that picture of him on Facebook sitting atop his prized 1967 Mustang Shelby GT, looking all like suave as Jim looked, and he truly looked like a beatnik. And I think that's where his love for automobiles and transportation came. And later then came to SEMCOG, SEMTA, and SMART. What a perfect fit. In 1992, as a passionate advocate for civil rights and racial equity, Jim found a home at Focus Hope, where he flourished professionally and personally. He became really close friends, as most of you know, or maybe not, with Father Bill Cunningham and Eleanor Jositis, the co-founders of Focus Hope. And, as I was writing this, I thought, oh my gosh, I bet you somewhere in the beyond, those two Catholics and the atheist are sitting there having a drink. Father and Eleanor are probably having a scotch, and Jim is having that really good wine that he liked, that Sauvignon Blanc one. And he's probably criticizing silently my grammar right now. Jim was an incredible writer and speaker. So if you were to go to Focus Hope and learn more about Focus Hope, you'll see an indelible imprint all over the organization. The Food Prescription Program, the Center for Children, the Center for Advanced Technologies, and most notably, the Community Arts Department. When he first came on board, he served as the Assistant Development Officer, where he was responsible for fund development. And here he authored numerous successful proposals from federal, state, corporate, private funds, and it valued more than $35 million. So another wow. He was quite the writer. However, I think the proposal that he was most proud of and excited about is the one to the Ford Foundation that it developed the Community Arts Department at Focus Hope. It was a really highly competitive proposal, and he won it, and subsequently had this 4-year grant to conceive and design art programming for the Community Arts Department. And the goal was really to integrate the arts into a community organization so it could impact urban youth in a way where they might not have even known they were being impacted by fun things like visual arts and music. So I want to point out just a handful of the programs and projects that Jim conceived during his time at Focus Hope. Jim was actually invited by the Ford Foundation to host the showing of the exhibition Countdown to Eternity. This was an exhibition by Benedict Fernandez, a photographic exhibition, and it depicted the civil rights movement and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from every angle. So, of course, Father Cunningham and Eleanor were like all over that and was like, yes, Jim, bring that to Focus Hope. That exhibit needs to be there. Does anybody remember it being there? Yeah, it was, I remember it being a pretty exciting time. And of course, Jim was really ecstatic and privileged to facilitate the exhibition being there. And then another program that was really successful and had Jim's hands all over it, he developed it and conceived it, is Focus on the Mission. This was an annual diversity and leadership program that challenged urban and tri-county high school students to use photography to address the role of diversity, both cultural, racial, and how that looked in the region, but also in their own lives. So really doing a lot of thinking about what can I do as a youth in rural Armada to make a difference with justice in the community and beyond. Since its inception in 1995, nearly 1,000 students graduated from the program. It ran for 20 years, and I was very grateful that I got to play a part in running that program after Jim was going on to do bigger things. Did you know that Jim was a jazz lover? I don't know if you all knew that. So he was always looking for ways to use this art form, this jazz, for educational purposes. And in 1998, when I came on board, the then manager went on pregnancy leave, on maternity leave, and left me and Jim to organize this multi-pronged event to host jazz master Donald Byrd. If you're a jazz lover and you're from Detroit, even if you're not from Detroit, you probably know who Donald Byrd is. He also happens to be a Cass Tech graduate. So Byrd had just created this curriculum and workshop called Music is Math is Art, and it explored the connections between music and mathematics. And so, of course, Jim, we're going to do this. We're going to bring him in. And so we had about, in rotation, a total of 200 young children from the neighborhood around Focus Hope come to Donald Byrd's workshop. And the event also included an exhibition of Donald Byrd's African American collection, really incredible collection of art. And then we had a phenomenal community jazz jam session in the evening. So many of the Detroit jazz masters came and just jammed with Donald Byrd. This was such a highlight for Jim. He so enjoyed putting this on. It was really amazing. Another way that he used jazz, so Harold McKitty, another Detroit jazz master, him and his family had created a program called Jazz for a New Generation. So for lovers of the Montreux Jazz Fest, which is now the Detroit International Jazz, it's always Montreux to me, but the McKinney family put together this program called Jazz for a New Generation to educate families, children and families, about the roots of jazz. So Jim saw this program as something worthy to put Focus Hope's stamp behind. So for, I don't even know how many years, but so many years, Focus Hope, i.e. Jim, we had that sponsored by Focus Hope at the Montreux. And so that's one of his babies as well. There's just so many other Focus Hope projects that he instituted, but those were really some of the highlights. So a few numbers to throw out. While at Focus Hope, Jim curated close to 20 art exhibitions. He recruited numerous photo mentors for programs. I counted 88 photography mentors who volunteered over a 23-year period. I also counted upwards of 3,000 youth who participated in the Focus Hope Community Arts Department programs that were spurred or they were spin-offs of what Jim had started in the early years. So, folks, that's what Jim did. He made stuff happen. He made important stuff and good stuff happen. So after his stint at Focus Hope as the, whatever he was then, sorry, I'd have to go back. He became the manager of communications a little over a decade afterwards. And he was responsible for managing a team of award-winning creative professionals, and he served as the principal designer for all public relations and marketing campaigns and materials. And I just also want to add that Jim's heart was so much into the annual Martin Luther King Day celebration at Focus Hope, and he served as the principal organizer, producer, and stage director of that event every January, and that was really close to his heart. He also was very involved in the creative and technical aspects, directing the Focus Hope Walk annually. Each of these events drew anywhere from 500 to 1,000 people every year. So as you can see, truly Jim's imprint is all over Focus Hope's history, and many of those programs are still alive and kicking today. So right on, Jim. So later, he became more interested in information technology, and he moved from Focus Hope to New Horizons Computer Learning Centers, where he was a technical assistant to the Chief Information Officer from 2007 to 2013. So this is a really large learning center. I didn't know that much about it, but it's the world's largest independent IT training company with over 300 locations in 72 countries, and they embrace many cultures and languages. So again, I was really happy to read that and to know that Jim had found a second home where he could put his passions and his knowledge to really good use. While he was at New Horizons, his role was varied and broad. He managed the company's central help desk at the headquarters. He authored and documented all processes and procedures of the IT department. He performed the daily system backups. He was the main person with all the vendors, and I could just go on and on with a whole bunch of other, as he would say, IT geeky stuff that he was doing during his time at New Horizons. So if there's anybody here from New Horizon, maybe you want to share later, because I don't know a lot about his history there. So in Jim's mid-60s, he started considering retirement as a new lifestyle. But he knew formal retirement wasn't the gig for him. There was no way that he would formally retire. He just had too much passion and knowledge to share. So over the past 8 years, Jim stayed busy, physically, mentally, creatively, by serving as a contractor and volunteer. He was also, as you know, all of you probably know, very active in furthering his creative photographic art. And he had the opportunity to show his work over 35 exhibitions nationwide. And Jody's going to share a little bit more after a bit about his creative life. I got the boring part about his career. So during his retirement, Jim continued to create and stay involved in the Detroit community. And during his retirement years, he did a lot of photo editing, restoration, and design. He volunteered to serve as a curator of the exhibition, the John F. Kennedy. He was the president. These are photographs by the award-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer Tony Spina from the Detroit Free Press. He had short-term contracts providing IT support to a variety of companies. And he just so, he was my backbone even when he wasn't at Focus Hope. I was there 20 years, and I could always lean into Jim for wisdom. I could always lean into Jim to volunteer physically. And so throughout his retirement at Focus Hope, this is just a sprinkling, he digitized the 30-year video archive of Focus Hope. He wrote a successful proposal to the Arcadia Publishing Company for a book with historic images on the history of Focus Hope. You know those brown books that are called, I think, they're published by, they're the little brown books. You see them on Black Bottom, on Paradise Valley. But Jim won this proposal, or got the proposal to have this one published on Focus Hope, but it's still pending. When we were awarded Knight funds to have the Focus on Detroit Photo Festival in 2018 and 19, he immediately jumped in and was writing text for different shows. He curated the Celebrating Diversity Mentor exhibition, which was held here, and he wrote the text for Straight Out of the Camera exhibition. So many things with that festival. And then in the 50-year anniversary of the 1967 rebellion, Focus Hope was awarded monies to create a short documentary and an exhibition looking at the rebellion through the eyes of the neighborhood around us. And so, of course, Jim jumped in and helped me write text for the exhibition and did photography and just made it happen. And then one other thing I'll just point out is Kathy wanted to try out Kickstarter. Kathy was our then manager of communications. And so we thought, okay, let's try to create a book looking at the history of the Focus on the Mission program, the youth program that addressed diversity. And Jim wrote the beautiful, beautiful foreword in the book. But really, I mean, if you were to look at all these pictures, yes, they're the students' photos, but I really feel like they're Jim's as well, because this was born out of his spirit of seeing in such a unique way and really wanting others to see in that unique way as well. So if you get a minute, I'll just leave it up here somewhere. You could look at the foreword that he so beautifully wrote and look at some of the photographs as well. So I'm going to stop. Nobody heckled me, so that's good. But as you can see, he had an incredible career throughout his 40 or so professional life. So I'm going to hand it over to Jody, and Jody's going to make us laugh. I told her she's the funny one.
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm going to have to read this because I'm not used to talking in front of people. If you follow Jim's Facebook page, you saw beautiful black and white images that his father took. His father was a photographer.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Okay, try that.
Okay, better? Okay, his father was a phenomenal photographer. He had the lights, he did the developing in the basement. Jim's mother was an artist, and his aunt was also an artist, so he was determined to get into the arts. In 1974, he entered his first photograph in the Scarab Club, so that was really exciting for him. And then, when in his 20s, he was living with his first wife, and across the street was a man who was a photographer, and Jim got to know him, and pretty soon they got really interested in talking about it. And the guy would photograph weddings and take Jim along, and he became his helper. And then when the guy moved out, he gave Jim all his blackroom equipment. I'm not sure if it was when it was, but he actually did meet Ansel Adams at a gallery in Birmingham, and he told me he really wished he would have spent that $300 on that print, because now it sells for between $7,000 and $40,000. So first he started with landscaping, and then I'm going to repeat some of the stuff that Annette said because we didn't coordinate, but it's okay. Being from the Motor City, he developed an early passion for the design of automobiles. He combined an interest in photography and automobiles when he found himself intrigued with the close-up, intimate details of car designs. This led to a series he called The Secret Lives of Automobiles. He loved everything about photography. He said he loves the process of just having my camera with me and being struck emotionally by something. It doesn't have to be involving people, but by an emotional response to some design or some element. He mentioned seeing the quality of light in certain circumstances and ended up calling his company and his website A Quality of Light. He loved being the staff photographer for Montreux Jazz for 5 years because it combined not only photography but this love for jazz. So he was thrilled, and he really, really liked having the backstage pass. Then he began taking more elegant still lifes and ended up calling that hugely popular series Simple Gifts. It wasn't long after that he started filming video. He filmed and produced a 13-minute-long video called Growing Old on the Streets after curating a combined exhibition of photography with other fine arts. He would spend hours in his office delicately perfecting the timing of the music with the fading in and out of the art. Our trip to Havana and the surrounding area culminated in his book, The Simple Gifts, the Book of Cuba. And it was his dream to start publishing a series of books that were based, each one on each genre, abstract, cars. You know, he covered so many different portraits. So we remember him as a photographer who was able to capture the essence of the world around him. And he had a passion for justice and commitment to lending his many talents for the greater good.
I know that there's so many to share. So hopefully you remember them, you have them ready. So could I guess I talk louder than you. Joe Dare, if you could come on up. Joe Dare is a longtime Focus Hope colleague and friend. Do you want to be on the?
I'll take Jody's size of microphone. Actually, the reason I'm up here is my sister, Trina Flannery Erickson, is the gallery manager at the Scarab Club, and unfortunately she had to go back there today, so she asked that I speak on her behalf, because not only did I have the pleasure of working with Jim for a number of years at Focus Hope, but also Trina had the pleasure of working alongside Jim for many years at the Scarab Club in his capacity with focus on the mission, and also in Jim's capacity as an artist, a very talented artist, both in photography and I believe in mixed media as well. And she thought so highly of him as an artist. And I know those at the Focus Hope, honestly, I have to say he was a wonderful artist and is esteemed at the Scarab Club and will be very dearly missed there. So on behalf of my sister, Trina Flannery Erickson, and those members of the Scarab Club, I say to Jody and to Jim's family, he was a wonderful man, and that community will miss him very much. So on their behalf, I give you their thanks for Jim's life. And what a wonderful man he was. But I have to say, on a very small way, I have to say, I loved working with Jim at Focus Hope. He was a great guy. When I came to Focus Hope, it was 2001, and I was a little bit nervous. And I remember one of the first few days, someone said to me, well, Joe, just take a walk down the campus. So I said, okay. So I went down the campus, and I went to the outside of the MTI building, the old MTI building. And there was, you wouldn't believe this, Kevin Robinson. I think he'll appreciate this. I went outside, and there were these two men. One was so debonair in a three-piece suit with the gray, beautiful hair, and it was our friend right here, this good-looking guy. It was Jim. And the other one was a countryman of my own, Tom Murphy. So they said, oh, hello, who are you? So we started chatting. Those two guys, I felt completely, I thought this is a good place to be. And that was my introduction to Focus Hope. Focus Hope was a wonderful place to work. I enjoyed being there back in those days. And I have to say, I was an executive assistant there, and in the meetings I had to sit through back in the old days, taking the notes and Greg shorthand, and in later years on the computer. Jim would be in most of those meetings. And you see the look on his face here? You see that look right there? He could look through anyone, and he'd have his head to one side. And when the meeting would be over, I'd say to myself, that guy got all of it. He got down more stuff than I got in my notes, because he never missed a trick. He was always smart, he was always honest, and the truth is he was really tough. And like, you really didn't want to mess around with Jim. And I tried real hard to stay on his good side. So he was a wonderful man. He's going to be dearly missed. And Jody, and all, to both of you. He was a great man. He's going to be missed. And I say rest in peace. I'm sure that he's very happy now. God bless, and thank you for sharing him with us.
Joe was one of our Focus Hope comedians, so she could like spin a real life story. She could probably come up here 20 more times and tell more stories. Thank you, Joe. Okay, let's see. Is Linda Allen? Linda, you want to come up?
Okay. Hi, I'm Linda Allen, and Jim was a really good friend. Jody and Jim and I, we met about 7 years ago, and we shared the same funny bone. It's just when you meet someone that you can laugh with, eat with, hang out with, share art with, that's special, and Jim was special. We would get other people together and go out to eat, and we'd say, well, let's get the usual suspects. And I'm like, oh, no. We're getting the unusual suspects. So when we got together, it was unusually fun. He was a very giving type of person. He helped me with a project I had for Detroit Artist Market. $100 was the theme, and he helped me collage 100 deers on a board, and that was my $100. And he was very generous with his talent and information. He helped me with my photographs, and very giving, very kind. I really enjoyed his Simple Gifts series, and there's a wonderful song, Simple Gifts, you can look it up. Beautiful song, but I think really that Jim was simply the gift.
That was good. I agree, Linda. Let's see. Paul Fallon?
Hi, my name is Paul Fallon, and I was a friend of Jim's. I got to know him through my wife, who worked at New Horizons during his tenure there, and she introduced us, and we became quite chummy, as you always would with Jim. He was a very open-hearted, generous kind of man who was very generous with his time. And I wanted to talk about one of the last times I saw Jim, which was just a few weeks ago. We went to an event for filmmakers. Jim, even late in his career, was interested in new endeavors, especially new artistic endeavors. And he was interested in expanding his creativity into the realm of film. He wanted to make a film about the death of his sister. And if you know Jim and his family history, that was a very sore point with him, and he wanted to work out his issues surrounding that event on film. And so we went to an event where Detroit filmmakers were gathering to meet and greet. And on the way home, we were listening to the radio, and a Jimi Hendrix song came on. And he asked me to turn it up, so I did, which I was more than happy to do. And after the song, and maybe some of you who knew Jim might have heard this story, he told me about the time that he went to see Jimi Hendrix in 1967 at Cobo Hall. And according to Jim, it was a fantastic concert, as it would be. And at the end of it, he set his guitar on fire, and he did all the things that Jimmy is famous for. And Jim was there with his camera, of course. And he took a lot of great up-close pictures of the concert. And after the concert was over, he and his girlfriend, later his wife, went up to the roof of Cobo Hall, where everybody parked, and found that his car was blocked in by another car. Well, I guess back in those days, people were a lot more trusting, and they used to leave their keys in the car. So Jim just hopped into this other car and moved it. And as he was going home, he was about 3/4 of the way home when he discovered he left his camera sitting on the passenger seat of the other person's car. And I've thought about that a lot in the past few weeks, and most recently since he was passing, because Jim, with his art, would have taken some great pictures, and of course they're lost to us forever. And it said to me a lot of things about the impermanence of art itself, and about the lives we lead and the lives we share with each other. And it made me think that, it reminded me really, that when you're with somebody that you care for, that enriches your life, let them know. Because, as we all know, it can be gone so soon and leave a void. So that's all I have to say, and thank you for listening.
What a bittersweet, awesome story that was. Wow. Okay, let's see. Elaine Gross.
Hi there. My name's Elaine, and I actually discovered Jim through Focus on the Mission. I think I was probably 18. I did it for about 18 years, and I learned a lot. We had so many great times. We had little get-togethers. Jim was always there. I loved watching him work with the kids and planning everything, and all the people like Annette and Veronica and all the other people that manage the program. It was just probably one of the greatest experiences of my life. And Jim was such a big part of that. And we always had so much fun time together. I remember one time ending up at Eleanor Jositis' house having drinks. And I'm sure Jim was there, and I can't even remember how I ended up getting there. But we had a lot of fun together, and I was fortunate enough to meet Jody when Jim brought her as a first date to Eleanor's funeral. And early on date. And so we were there for Eleanor's luncheon, and I got to know Jody. And we had a great camaraderie, and we ended up going out to dinner. We'd have dinner at their house. We'd go to fairs and take pictures. And Jim and I would get lost, and Paul and Jody would just kind of wander around. So there were so many things that, there's so many experiences we had, and I just wanted to say a quick word. And the hardest thing for me when I call him, I won't hear, "Hello, my friend." And that's really sad. So thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Cheryl Simon.
Maybe up here. Good afternoon. My name's Cheryl Simon. I worked at Focus Hope from 2000 to, I think, 2005. So Jim and I were colleagues. I'm not going to really talk about our work time, although I had a tremendous amount of respect for Jim as a professional. I want to tell a little personal story. I think all of us remember where we were on September 11th, 2001. I was at Focus Hope at my desk, and actually we were hosting a donor who had been a World War II pilot. And very quickly, when things were unfolding, we went in one of the conference rooms and turned on the TV, and this gentleman was kind of telling us what he very quickly figured out what was going on. And a few days after that tragic event, we had a little service, a memorial in the park at Focus Hope. And I think Annette probably remembers Kathy, One, Kevin, Tom, some other folks that are here. And Jim took a photo of me and my then 18-month-old son, who at the time was down at the Center for Children. And he framed it and gifted it to me. That photo has sat in my room, my bedroom, for 20 years old now. And it's right here. You can see it's a little yellow around the edges, not like some of these newer photos. It's been around a long time, but that was such a meaningful photo to me that, I think about this idea of simple gifts and Jim's generosity. And I mean, that photo for me just kind of embodies what Jim was as a human being. And I really just appreciate knowing him. And Jody, I'm just sorry for your loss and for your family. But as you will know, he lives on in a little bit of all of us and in all these wonderful pieces of art that he created. So thank you.
Hey, Jody. My name is Marcia Philpott. I'm also known as Marcia Music. I was married to an artist by the name of David Philpott, who was a master carver, master woodworker, and assembler. And he walked around in all events with giant staffs, and he carved staffs at the African World Festival. He died 3 years ago this summer. He had been photographed because of his very dramatic and iconoclastic look. He had been photographed by so many people, some of the best photographers in Detroit. Jeff Cancelosi, Charlene Ursery, Emma Lockridge, Janice Burns, a number of very significant photographers who photographed him. But there was one photograph that was taken that the moment I saw it, I knew that I would have that photograph on his obituary should he predecease me, because it captured him in a certain way that was very unusual. It is this picture right here. At the end. And it's unusual because Philpott was always captured with a giant staff in his hand with a top hat on. He always wore a black top hat called a steampunk hat and a big leather hat. And he was always photographing that very highly dramatic persona. However, somehow Jim captured him right straight through to his heart in a way. And the unusual thing about the photograph is that it looks like it's a formal portrait. However, they were at the Mbad Bead Museum on Grand River. They were outside, just hanging out outside, and Philpott was sitting in the back of a station wagon, of his truck. He was sitting in the back of his big Chevy Suburban, and he was just sitting on the tailgate with his carving in his hand, hanging out. It was so hot, he took his hat off, and Jim happened to walk up at that moment, and he took a photograph of him at that moment, and eventually cropped it, and it became this formal portrait. And I will never forget it, and I used it as his obituary photo when he passed away. And I just am so grateful for this gift. And this spring, he called me out of nowhere and offered to bring me another print of it. And lo and behold, he came by, and the thing is that big. It's a huge portrait. And I was just moved to tears, and I was very grateful to have it. In fact, I am gifting it to his children, and because they don't have the kind of photographs that I have here in Detroit, they live out of town. And so I am so grateful for the work that Jim did, not only capturing my husband, my late husband, but also all of these wonderful images of Detroit and elsewhere. And Jody, thank you for allowing us to gather.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like generous Jim, for sure. Asia Hamilton.
Hello, everybody. So, I've been knowing Jim since I was 16 years old. I was a part of the first Focus on the Mission project. And, you know, I was a weird kid in a way that, like, I just talked too much. And I was, you know, I talked a lot. And my regular school teachers seemed like they didn't really like me much. But when I got to Focus Hope, I really felt like I was at home, and that, you know, I belonged in that space. And, you know, as a photographer, I had some of the most amazing mentors to help me in my career. And Jim was like the coolest person ever. I mean, he just had a very cool personality. It wasn't like, you know, he wasn't way up here and it wasn't way down here. He was just a very cool person and always showing up at the right time. You know, he came into the gallery maybe like, I own Norwest Gallery, and he came into the gallery maybe a couple of months ago, and I was so happy to see him and surprised. I was just like, oh, everybody. I was like, Jim's here. We took some photos, and just always good conversation and extremely encouraging in everything that I do. He showed up at my job once. I was working for Spectrum Human Services, and he you know, I did this like call for artists, and he came and he donated a bunch of his work for us to auction off. And you know, even there, I was like introducing him to everybody, like, you know, this is one of my mentors. So I'm extremely grateful for that. You know, I'm like, I have a story. You know, I ended up becoming one of the mentors for Focus on the Mission, you know, after high school. And I was one of the artists that was able to shoot the Montrose Jazz Festival because of Jim. And, you know, these were our incredible opportunities for me coming from, you know, Southwestern High School, you know, Votech. You know, I truly am grateful for all of the love that Focus on the Mission, that Jim, that Hugh Granum, that Alex, that all of these amazing mentors, you know, provided for me. So just saying, love you most, Jim. And you've joined the ancestors. And send us some photo love back to this earth. Thanks.
You know, Jim was so, okay, you know, I gotta do it. Jim was so proud of Asia. I mean, in the first program of Focus on the Mission, 1996, it was a 95-96 school year, and to have her go to Columbia College in Chicago and major in photography, and then to come back and to be a many year mentor in the program and to give back. And then to go on and open up Norwest Art Gallery. Yeah, like Jim was on cloud nine, proud of you, Asia. So right on, sister. Okay, let's see, what do we got here? Kylie Baker on behalf of, is it Skip Dans? Oh, Skip Davis, okay.
Hello all. Many of you will know me as the sidekick to Skip Davis at any event that I am blessed enough to go to him with. I was working with Skip the end of 2019, just after I moved to Detroit, helping him pack up his 45-year family home and move him into his new condo. That's actually where I met Jody and Jim for the first time. I managed to meet them multiple times at other events afterwards, but I just wanted to say from personally, a little bit of full circle, I purchased my own home in March this year, and it took me until the 29th of July, just this year, to get all of my art up on my walls. But there was a gap. Skip and I had already planned it out before we did any hanging, and he knew there was a gap, and he said, look, I'm going to look at some of my pieces and see if there's something that would work here. Now you can imagine what he brought along was a bunch of the prints that he had been gifted from Jim, and then he gifted one to me. This is the one I chose. I love it. It fills the most perfect place on my living room wall. And that was mere weeks ago. I'm sad because I owe Jim a meal. I had thought that day that I wanted him to come around with Skip and have dinner at mine so he could see his beautiful piece on my wall. And then as life happens, I didn't get round to it until I got the dreadful news that he'd passed. I know Skip was stunned. He was also really grateful to have had just a really beautiful interaction with Jim only a few weeks before to have been given those prints. And Skip asked me to come today. He's actually in California with his family, and just say just a little piece here, so if you'll forgive me. Skip says, Jim was a fine friend and a superb talent. His Simple Gifts series reflected who he was, a quiet, peaceful, respectful, and kind man. You've left us way too soon, Jim. I agree.
Charlene Welton.
I met Jim 6 years ago through the artist community. It was at the first interpretation show, an idea and series by Tim Tanashella, to pair up painters with photographers. Incidentally, it was about a truck, a close friend of Jim's favorite, cars. I was struck immediately by Jim's extraordinary photography. He was Tim's partner, writing all the text for that show and many to follow. It was evident how deeply he felt about his subjects. That's what made them so powerful and so full of beauty. The last few months that I saw Jim, he talked about family, music concerts, love, Focus Hope, photography, cars, and as usual, politics and philosophy. I will remember and miss him deeply. And for ever supportive, I will always treasure his hearts next to my work. My deepest condolences to friend Jody and Jim's entire family.
Thank you for sharing, Charlene. Jerry Lemonu.
I am one of several people here that go way back with Focus Hope. Tom Armstead and Tony and Mary Gamble and Kevin Robinson is here somewhere. I'm sure people that I don't know because I left Focus Hope a long time ago. It's kind of funny because my path with Jim's path, we never fully intersected. We never worked full time at the same place at the same time. I was in the early 70s and into the 80s at Focus Hope, doing publications and illustrating things, posters and painting signs, for food centers and whatever was needed. In 1983, Father Cunningham asked me if I would consider becoming a director, somebody in charge of communications. And that was the point where I knew I had to leave because I didn't want to be a director. I wanted to just be an artist. What they really needed was Jim, and he came around in '92, and was the person that Father Cunningham was looking for. He could do it all. He was, his many passions, all sort of sometimes seemed to converge, and whether it was photography or laying out an exhibit. He was meticulous, and everything was heartfelt. When I think back on Jim, I think about about what an artist he was. I think I've known him. Of course, we did collaborate some because I continued to volunteer for Focus Hope. But I think I know him best through his art. The Secret Life of Automobiles. He's got me believing that automobiles have secret lives. And I want to talk to one, find out a little bit more. Although he sort of made these automobiles speak, like everything. He saw, he was an artist in that he loved line, form, color, shapes. Just the composition. He could break it down and love it for that. But there was also more to it than that. Every object, every picture has a quiet story, has kind of a simmering, quiet intensity like Jim himself. And I think every picture that he took is in its own way a kind of self-portrait. But beyond art, Jim loved people. He loved high school kids. And as it turned out, the year that he joined Focus Hope was the year I started becoming a high school art teacher at the Center for Advanced Studies in the Arts in Oak Park. And that school involved 7 different school districts, Berkeley and Clawson, and there were 7 different school districts who would send their kids in to the afternoon for an advanced program. And then I started working at Ferndale High School in the morning. When the opportunity, because I still had, thank God, connections with Focus Hope, opportunity came for me to send students to focus on the mission. It was something I jumped at, and the students jumped at. We haven't talked a lot about that program, but the concept that Jim came up with was absolutely brilliant. In many ways, photography was the vehicle. It wasn't as much about the photography, but it was about the looking that the kids that participated in this program were encouraged to do. And the looking side by side with somebody from another part of town. It was city and suburb. People living in all kinds of houses in all kinds of neighborhoods. And they photographed their neighborhoods, and they traveled off to different neighborhoods together. And each one saw something different. And then they would compare notes. And through photography, they became a kind of family. All these kids. And I'm sure that, that all these students, or so many of these students, would say today that it was one of their great experiences in high school. It went beyond the walls of that particular high school. I know my students felt that way, very much that way. So, that's Jim. The art is Jim, and the vision is Jim, and the love is Jim. I'm like everybody else here. I plan to have a lunch with him sometime soon. But I still get to visit him when I visit his photographs. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry, and it was always great to get your students from Oak Park. They always contributed so much. Could we have, let's see, Dorothy Jett Carter, please?
My name is Dorothy Jett Carter. Can you hear me? No? My name is Dorothy Jett Carter. My husband was Rod Carter, the fine art photographer, and he and Jim were extremely good friends, having gotten to know each other even more closely working together at Focus Hope. In 2019, November, my husband and I, after returning from a lengthy stay in West Africa, had made a decision to relocate to Ghana. We were excited, we were happy, we were keeping our plans to ourselves so that we didn't have to hear anyone else's opinions. Jim happened to be one of the few people that Rod had shared that news with. And then Rod died. I didn't know what to do. I walked around in circles, just bewildered. On top of that, there seemed like 100 people telling me different things that I should do, and I was trying to follow the directions of all of them. Jim was one of the few people who let me know that it was okay to just listen and do the exact opposite if that's what I felt like doing. Jim and Jody were responsible for putting together a beautiful tribute memorial program at for his celebration of life. They were responsible for the PowerPoint presentation during that same celebration. And Jim made sure with my stepson and my son that Prince and Earth, Wind, and Fire was the music playing in the background. I will be forever grateful.
Thank you, Dorothy. And Rod, of course, was one of the wonderful mentors in the program that Jim started. Charlene.
Buenos amigos. My name is Charlene Ursi. I come to you with it's Spanish, but it's a Cuban greeting. And I said, hello, friends. And I decided to greet you all with Buenos amigos because Jody and Jim said to me, we want to go to Cuba, and we want to go and be there when you're there. I'm African-Cuban American. A lot of people have said that to me, but they don't follow through. They follow through. Not only of traveling to Cuba, which really isn't the easiest thing to do, although it's only 90 miles away, but then also saying that they want to be there when I'm there. And I said, okay. And when they knew that they were coming, I told them where to stay. They listened to me. So, because they stayed in the neighborhood that my family stays, my mother's brother, my uncle. And they were only 5 blocks away from me. So I could walk to where they were staying, and they could walk to my family's home, which makes it very convenient because very few people have cars. Private citizens have cars in Cuba. My family does not own a car. And so that was wonderful. I would barely have on clothes and walk down to their home while they were in Cuba. And they did tours, but then they also did tours with me because I know Havana pretty well. As a matter of fact, this picture here with the pink car, I was with Jim and Jody when that photograph was taken. We shared meals together, they saw dancing and music, and it was good for them, but it was also good for me because there were people from Detroit that spoke English that I could communicate with. And so it was just also gratifying for me. They also got to meet my family, my uncle, my mother's brother, and a couple of my cousins. And that was good too, not only for me, but also for them, because they got to see a middle class, quote, middle class Cuban family. And most people, when they travel to Cuba, they go to the typical tourist sites or whatever, but they don't see a real Cuban family. And that is something that I thought was special, and I know they did too. So I'm just forever grateful that they were able to make the trip and that I was able to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene. I didn't know about that whole backstory there. That was great. We have a few more. Tom Armstead, one of Jim's longtime friends from Focus Hope.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Armstead, and I'm a former assistant director at Focus Hope. Annette pretty much covered a lot of the stuff that I was going to say, but I do have a couple of stories I want to tell you. But first, let me speak to Jim's incredible talents in mixed media, in grant writing. Jim came to Focus Hope in what I call the wonder years of the 90s. We had a $70 million budget. We had over 800 people that worked for the organization, and we were doing some great things, and Jim's contribution in terms of grant writing made the difference. I would look forward, as Annette said, Jim and I were always on the Martin Luther King Day organization, and I was amazed at every year the videos, the pamphlets, the posters that Jim came up with year after year were just mind-blowing. He was an incredible talent, and his impact on this community will be around for many years to come. I have a quick story. Also, I'd like to add to Annette's list there that Jim was also part of the team that provided all of the information. As a matter of fact, Jim did it single-handedly for Focus Hope's contribution to the Reuther Library. He organized all the photographs, all the documents, and that was an outstanding presentation. Many of us saw after it was completed, but Jim did a fantastic job on that, as always. As Annette mentioned, Jim was a jazz enthusiast, and so was I. And we often talked about all the jazz greats. And one day we were talking about various artists, and I mentioned a jazz artist by the name of Rufus Harley who played the bagpipes. And Jim said, "Oh, Scotch and Soul." I said, "Scotch and Soul is the name of the album," and I misplaced my album. I don't have any idea, and you can't find it anywhere. Jim had developed a process to digitize music before that became natural. What he did was he took his record player, put a mic there, recorded it on a VCR, took the VCR, connected to his computer, and digitized it. Jim also told me Rhapsody had just came out with streaming music, I guess, and Jim had also told me how to hook up my computer so that I could record music from Rhapsody, but I was too stupid to learn what Jim had told me, so I never did it. But back in and later in the 90s, we had, after Father Cunningham's passing, we had a gentleman from Ford Motor Company who was the chief operating officer. And they changed from a system of assistant directors to several program managers and departments, and people reported to people from various areas. And because I was the director of programs, they wanted Jim to report to me. And right after they had mentioned that, I went back and talked to Tim. I said, "Tim, nobody can tell Jim what the hell to do. He's brilliant. Let him do it. Let him stand on his own. He don't need to be supervised by any of us." And so they did. They gave Jim his direct program, so he did not have to report to anybody, but he did a fantastic job over there. I also would like to give my condolences to the family and thank you for sharing him with us. He was quite a gentleman. In Asia, you said that Jim was a very cool guy, but you didn't know me. I think Jim was cool too, but he was the second coolest guy at Focus Hope, after me.
Oh, that was a good one, Tom. Next up, Kevin Robinson, another longtime Focus Hope colleague and more so friend.
All right, good afternoon. Yeah, this is interesting. I started Focus Hope in 1983, September 19th at 8:20 a.m. Okay, and I was in the video department under Carl Biderman. Years later, that's when I met Jim. And I remember walking into the resource center. Yes.
Can't hear you.
Can you?
Just get closer.
How's that? My rock star voice?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. But then years later, I met Jim, and I remember the first time I saw him, I looked up and I saw this very well-dressed guy with this beautiful head of hair. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, who the hell is this dude? You know, where does he work? He was working for Charlie Grenville at the time under development. And then later on, they hooked Jim up with me in communications. And that's when he had started to focus on the mission. He had started all the community arts things. And they moved us down into a building that was further down Oakman that housed myself, the video department, the print shop. You had Jim, you had Lord Teeley, you had Deborah, you had a few others, Jody Bathish, and some other people that worked down there. What I liked about working with Jim, and to Tom's point, you don't say because you manage somebody that they work for you. I didn't write his paycheck. I worked with Jim, and we all worked together. And there was a trust that you had with him. That's how good he was. Because when he took on something, you knew he was going to go into it with both feet. He wasn't going to play. You didn't have to watch him. You didn't have to constantly say, how's it going? Is you going to get it done on time? He had the commitment. When Father Cunningham passed in '97, first person I called was Jim. He was still at the site. I told him this could happen at any second, and I'm going to need you when this happens. And he was there. We always called each other brother, all the time. Got to a point where I wouldn't even use his name. That's what we called each other. Last time I saw him was, in June, early June, down in Midtown. And we had a short talk. And I'm glad that we did. He meant a lot to me. There are several books that we were supposed to look at. I had purchased these books upwards of 6 years ago, and we never found the time. When he passed, I finally sat down and looked at him. And I remember something Jody said. He said, don't worry, he's looking over your shoulder. And I truly believe that. I didn't know I would get this emotional, talking about him. But he really meant a lot. He meant a lot to me. But I can't end like this. I got to end with some humor, okay? Jim and I used to talk a lot about things, a lot of music, food, of course, art. I'm not an artist, but I love buying it. I love supporting artists. I love going to concerts. So we were talking about some stuff, and I remember I pulled out my old Al Bundy, 4 touchdowns in 1 game concert, which was, Jim, I saw Led Zeppelin, 1973, $3.50, and I was right against the stage. And I could see John Bonham's feet moving as he played his drums. And Jim looked at me and he said, smiled. He said, Kevin, that's good, that's good. I saw Jimi Hendrix. And I said, okay, I'll shut up and listen, okay? But no, he was a beautiful individual. He really was. He was great to work with. He gripped his art. He loved it. And you want to work with people like that. Some people are afraid of folks like that. They're afraid of people who are strong, and I don't care what gender you are. They have strong opinions that back their work up to the nth degree. You should embrace those folks. Because those are the folks that's going to open you up just a little bit more and make you a little bit better. And he certainly did make me a little bit better. Condolences to everybody. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, there was always a lot of good music stories in the community arts, communications, marketing arena at Focus Hope with Kevin and Jim. Before Jody comes up and shares, is there anybody else that would like to come up and share? Anybody that I missed? Jacques? And Jacques, I didn't know it was you until 5 minutes ago. I am sorry. These masks.
Okay, I'm Jacques, and I didn't intend to say anything this afternoon. However,
I'm going to move them. You gotta come really close.
Okay. I didn't intend to say anything this afternoon. However, having heard a lot of the speakers, and it dawns on me that I owe it to Jim and to his wife and family. I'm sorry to be emotional about it. I have a weird history. Very young, I was chosen in my family to become a Jesuit priest. Well, I started going to school, etc., and I knew I was going to become a priest. But in my later teens, I began to change my mind because I got involved with the study of philosophy in particular and history, and that gave me a completely different outlook on life. And I progressively moved away from the church until I, by faith I suppose, ended up in Detroit. And I heard about this Father Cunningham, and he's a sort of a Jesuit priest who was doing all kind of weird things, and the kind of things that I like, that are social, political, artistic, everything. And I said, okay, I'll be happy to meet this guy. And I went to visit the Focus Hope operation, and I went into Cunningham. And I sort of fell in love with him. I enrolled in the program, etc. And I was like a fish out of water, because here I was back in the fold of the Catholic Church that I internally had broken up with. Not that I was hostile or anything of that sort, but intellectually I was in the opposite direction. I had become an atheist. And lo and behold, I, of course, couldn't have any discussion or debate with anybody at Focus Hope. I was completely an oddball. Tom can testify to that. And until I bumped into Jim Aho. And then I discovered in him a secret atheist. And for some reason, I was able to speak with Jim as if I was speaking to myself. We could talk about religion. We could talk in details about philosophy, epistemology. I am not much of an artist. I can appreciate art. But what interested me in Jim was that he could give me an insight into art that I didn't get in school. See, as an epistemologist, I believe art deals with appearances. And I want to deal with the essence of things, not their appearance, okay? And Jim had to convince me that essence must appear. And to that extent, if you focus on the appearance of things, you will be better able to get down into their essence. But how do you do that? And this is the story of my long discussions and debates with Jim. We'll do it in the street, walking up and down the sidewalk. We couldn't do it inside of the building, so other people couldn't hear us, and so on and so forth. And that brought me very, very close to him. And close not in a personal, emotional way, but intellectually, we were more or less complementary. And I had a tendency to be somewhat exuberant, whereas Jim was so placid, quiet, almost immune to outward influences, so to speak. And he was my direct opposite. And because opposites attract, we were attracted to each other. At least I was attracted to him. And I still carry with me tremendous interest in him and admiration for him. And unfortunately, we never met and have personal contact, but I am pleased to be here to say thanks. And I love you.
Edna Jackson wanted to say a few words. Edna is a longtime Focus Hope colleague and friend as well.
Good afternoon to Jim's family and all of these friends who are here. My name's Edna Jackson, and social workers don't know anything about paintings and all of that. What I do recall was that at one time there was Jerry Lemoneau and Kevin Robinson who were responsible for the newsletter. All of a sudden, something happened, and all of the stuff began to look better. And we didn't know why it was looking better, but eventually we found out that Father had hired somebody to do the real work, because Jerry and Kevin had 4 jobs each. So they didn't have a lot of time to spend doing all of that kind of stuff. So Father finally discovered that we needed somebody who could really do the work and concentrate on that. I had no idea, and I was at Focus Hope before Jim came. I don't know what years and all that kind of stuff. By the way, I retired after 40 years last week. Thank you very much. But my heart is heavy because I used to watch every time Annette would have a new class coming in. And I said, oh, there she goes with all those kids again. And those kids would come in and they were just like college students. They were better than college students. College students, they do anything they want to do. But these kids were coming from high schools. And they would come in and they would get their work done, and they had an exhibit on the second floor of the 1400 building. And I would always make it my business to go over and see what they had done with the last class that they had. I was so excited when I saw the kinds of things that they did, because they were things that came from their mind. And they were people who had made a decision about something. And this is the kind of thing that Jim was teaching them to do. So I am here to tell you that Focus Hope has had some remarkable people to work with us. Jim Aho was one of the most unusual people, and the last time I saw him was about a year ago. And he said to me, you got to get around there on Midland and see the work that I'm doing. And I said, okay, Jim, I'm going to get around there. Of course, I haven't gotten around there. And yesterday when I stopped in, just to make sure I knew where everything was today. I was talking to the persons who own the facility and who was getting the art ready for today, and they said he's always done phenomenal work for us. He's good, he knows what he's doing, and the way you can tell how good Jim was because he just loved doing it. He enjoyed doing it. He would always be there when you needed him, and we're going to miss him so much, but we're so pleased that you decided to have this event for him so that we could talk a little bit about him and the wonderful person that he was.
Veronica Pais would like to say a few words, colleague and friend. And
thank you. I'll keep this short. I first met Jim when Annette hired me for Focus Hope Community Arts Department in 2002, I think it was, and I met Jim through there, and Jim's always been a really welcoming and friendly person. Throughout the years, I've known him to be same, even outside of Focus Hope. He and I have kept in touch over the years. Not close, but we kept in touch, and it's welcomed me into his home along with Jody. But I think really what I want to say is that Jim's spirit, whether you knew him personally or not, is really evident in his photographs. This one here in the middle, I believe, was looking down on Lake Michigan and Lake Superior, okay, and it was, that's what I think of exploratory for Jim. You see the culture, Havana, different places he went, but I think what this all sums up is that he was an introspective, interested, pensive, and intimate person. And I think his spirit really comes out in his photographs, and that's how he'll live on. So, salute, Jim. Thank you.
thank you, Veronica. Is there anybody else? Carlos Diaz, longtime photographer, photography teacher at College for Creative Studies, who was on the founding committee of Focus on the Mission. Couldn't be here today, but he wanted me to share some words. And by the way, he said, please save me a copy of his Cuba book. So he said, it's funny, and I never mentioned this to Jim, but when I first met Jim at Focus Hope, I saw him as a gentle soul, at peace with himself, and there was an honesty conveyed in his face and through his voice. This was a man I remember and thinking who I can trust in and be trusted by. So much that I remember thinking that Jim must be the Focus Hope priest that he had heard so much about. And Jim is cracking up right now wherever he is on that one. And then Carlos continues, well, he was all that, but he was all about that, but let's see. He was all that, but he was all that, but he was just a mere mortal, a common man, a regular guy. I think he would say, but he was much, much more. Please give my love to Jody. Yeah. Okay, if nobody else would like to come up and share a few words, I'm going to hand it over to Jody.
Well, I originally had some stories that I thought nobody knew, but a lot of them have already been.
Okay, we got to get you right up there because this is funny. I don't know if this is. Oh, sorry.
I wanted to bring some perspective to his life, things that you might not know, and a lot of it has already been mentioned. Jim was born in Highland Park. He was very proud of that. when we first found out, we used to call this the factory, and we came here when Robert Sestock was watching it for Rob, until Rob moved here from New Zealand, and we've been involved with very many activities and friends of most of the artists here. And you already know he exhibited photos here, he curated a show, he spent many years as an hours. Okay, then a little bit about us. I'd only known him for 10 years, but it's kind of interesting. We met on a dating site called Senior People Meet, MEET. And I actually found the profiles that we had posted up there, and they were so similar. It was really kind of eerie. And the thing that both of us emphasize is we want to find someone who has a good sense of humor. So that was it. So I was working at the time in an office, and Jim was working in Livonia, and we wanted to meet for lunch, but I had deadlines, I couldn't get out for lunch. And I was talking to him on the phone on a Friday afternoon, and okay, so that picture over there with his arms folded, that's my first impression of Jim. And I thought, this guy is like way too straight for me. But we'll see. So then he said, what are you doing tonight? And I said, I'm going down to the Detroit Riverfront to hear, who was it? Grand Funk Railroad with my girlfriends. And I said, never thinking he would agree, do you want to go? And he said, yeah. And it's like, oh my God, okay. So that was our first date. And then we're listening to the music, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm in my 50s, Jim is in his 60s, and if we don't get each other's sense of humor, like, why not? We shouldn't even bother with a second date. And I tested him, and he laughed his ass off. So, and one of the first dates, I went to Eleanor Dresitis' funeral. I met Tom and everyone. Everyone was so happy to see him, hugged him, and really, like, you could tell he was loved. Young, old, black, white, executives, custodians. Everyone said, so good to see you, Steve. Jim. Where did I get Steve from? And after that, the funeral, we went out and had a drink at a cafe, and I sat there saying, this is a really good guy. And then that nailed it for me. So I wanted to tell you some things that I knew about Jim. Who was Jim Aho? James Leary Aho, if you were his mother. Yimmy, if you were his grandmother. Loving son, and brother, loyal brother, 2 brothers and a sister. Husband twice. And in his profile on the dating site, he said he loved his daughter and grandchildren to bits, and that got me. He's also an uncle and a cousin and a friend and a bro. For a while, he lived in Massachusetts as a child, and when he came back, his parents took him to Lake Michigan, and he said, I like this big wada. He called it big wada because he had that New England accent, so it was kind of a joke between us. He was also a star pitcher for the Little League, a strange kid who started listening to jazz at age 10. He swore he saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex cross in front of him in the middle of the night while driving down a dirt road in Canton in the 1960s.
What kind of drugs was he doing?
I don't know. Also in the 60s, nobody's mentioned this, he was the gopher for Henry Ford II in Lehigh Iacocca. He was up on the top floor with all those executives bringing them their Danish and coffee, and he was really, really proud of that. And then I was going to mention the lost film from Cobo Hall, but we already got that. With a buddy, he knew where to get a sneak peek of the new models at the GM Proving Grounds, and he would take photos, and I don't know which car magazine, they were thrilled to have it because no one had seen these. And he got on the front page of the magazine, and he did this a few times until they got caught, but he really liked that. Jim hated show tunes and musicals, especially when Pat Boone sang, "I suddenly like to start singing in the middle of the Journey to the Center of the Earth." We just like, we couldn't believe it. He's singing, you know? Like, We also said when we were watching movies, they should have a warning that there's musicals in it too, because neither of us like musicals, so it was a joke with us. You don't see Jim wearing hats very often because he didn't want to mess up his hair, and that started very young. He was a feminist, a World War II buff, a great sympathizer of the Holocaust. He could speak eloquently in front of groups, even if it was spontaneously. I call him a rebel with a cause. He was a member of the Church of St. Mattress and graduate from the School of What's Happening with Kevin. Eleanor told him, "You guys are from the school, what's happening?" He was, of course, a sex folk grant writer. I have all the stuff people are, he voluntarily curated the exhibit of Tony Spina's JFK photos on the 50th anniversary of his assassination. He was Father Cunningham's drinking buddy. He loved white wine, dry white wine, Sauvignon Blanc from the Marlborough district of New Zealand. He didn't like sports or beer. He wouldn't eat tofu, but grilled it for some vegetarian friends. And this is something that Annette and I always joked about. He thinks he doesn't like Mexican food and other ethnic foods, but when he tasted it, he said he liked it. And I said, "I remember you said you like it." But even though he immensely enjoyed the diverse cultures of Detroit, he did not really enjoy the different flavors. He was a loyal employee, unless your name was Mike Duggan, and there's a huge story behind that. Award-winning videographer, producer, and editor, developer and advocate of Detroit mass transit. And then, of course, general manager for SMART, supervising thousands of employees and overseeing the construction of the People Mover, responsible for the commissioning the art of the People Mover, and strongly disliked the term People Mover. He loved telling stories about his adventures with Coleman Young. And then you already know about the program he started, and then he not only gave the kids the opportunity, but the professional photographers were able to mentor, and I think it really meant a lot to them. He mentored so many people at Focus Hope. He was the official photographer here. When there was an event, Rob would ask Jim to take photos for the website. He was a CNN junkie. He was fiercely loyal to Canon cameras. Staff photographer for Montreux, I already got that. He was a gifted photographer, even though he only had one good eye, no peripheral vision, and he was colorblind. His first photograph was accepted into the Scarab Club in 1974. His last photograph was accepted into the Scarab Club in 2021. Graphic designer, published writer, Photoshop magician. He was Employee of the Month so many times at New Horizons that they had to change the rules just to accommodate him. He was the self-assigned grammar police. He took his wife to the Pearl Harbor Museum Park, including a tour of the Fleet submarine and battleship on Valentine's Day during their honeymoon. But I knew he loved it, so. Huh? It's very romantic. I know, but it really meant a lot to him. He was an IT geek, but not a nerd. He could tell you the exact year he saw his favorite movies, at which theater, who he was with, sometimes where he was sitting, and who composed the film score. And this is a true statement. My personal favorite, who is Jim Aho, and I think it's his favorite. He was called a blue-eyed soul brother with a skinny white ass.
Thank you so much, Jody, for bringing some humor into that. I was really counting on her for that. if no one else has any remarks, I'm just going to close it out. I don't even know where to begin. I feel like I need to say something. And I've been pretty numb. And just, I mean, my stories aren't funny, but like I remember when I first started working there and I was cutting with an X-Acto knife, very sharp, the exhibition text, and he had just taught me how to do it. And then he was standing over me and, you know, he's so cool and calm. And apparently I was cutting like straight into my body. And instead of somebody that might be alarmed with that, you know, going, oh my gosh, Annette, he was so, Annette, you might want to move over. So just, you know, stuff like that. And so many memories. But I will just end it out saying that Jim truly was a friend. He was someone who maybe I wouldn't see for 6 months, but there was never any gap in our connection. He was one of the most selfless people that I knew. And I, like I said, I could always lean into him. I will be eternally grateful for the journey that he took me on at Focus Hope. I look back at my 20 years there with all you wonderful mentors and the students and the colleagues, and I really think I couldn't have had any better of a gig. So thank you, Jim, for creating the Community Arts Department, and to Jim and Kevin and Jody for hiring me. That's it. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for being such a good friend to Jim.